Plates ready? This is Food School, Smarter, Stronger, Leaner podcast. Want to feel amazing, love the way you look in the mirror, and perform your absolute best in the gym, at work, and in life? You're definitely in the right place. Food, it's you. It builds every single cell of you. And if there is one thing every human being must master, it's food. Because at the very least, eating, you do it every day, several times a day, every single day. You might as well get good at it. I'm your host, Shurina from Create Yourself That Today, your personal nutritionist and plate watcher, your diet guide and explorer, your fat loss coach and food inspector. And just someone with a lot of passion and obsession and curiosity for healthy food, healthy diets, nutrition, optimized human performance, everything and absolutely anything you put in your grocery shopping cart, your fridge, on your plate, and in your mouth. It's my business. Food School, on a mission to help you eat better daily.
It's the last time I talk about food. It's the last time I talk about food.
Everyone's a little bit different, but a group of acclaimed researchers have come together in a consensus and said that people need 7 to 9 on a regular basis.
Yeah, I read it from a few sources, and I completely agree. Like, I can notice if I don't get, for me personally, it's somewhere around 7.5, but that means that I gotta be in bed for 8 hours. So I sleep for about 7.5 hours. So that's, but it also depends, what time I go to bed. And if I don't go to bed early, that usually means that I'm not gonna get good quality of sleep, no matter how many hours I sleep.
Okay. Yeah, everyone has their own rhythm, and if you go out of your rhythm, you get worse quality sleep, which I think is what you're probably noticing.
Yeah, definitely. So let's just start our podcast, and thank you, Dan, for your time, for joining me on Food School podcast to tell our listeners more about sleep and how they can get more out of their sleeping hours, how to sleep better, how to sleep deeper, so they can show up their best for their lives, mentally and physically. So maybe tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you're passionate about, and we'll start it from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Angela. I appreciate it. So I've been studying sleep for 10 years because what I've always sort of has captivated me about this space is it's literally the human behavior that we do the most of. And so if you could just improve this behavior even a small amount, it would basically have a massive global health ramification. And the science is telling us that sleep is related to more chronic health illnesses than we initially gave it credit for. And I think this is happening at the same time that there's been, for maybe like 40 years, as long as 40 years, this kind of false idea, especially in the United States, where the harder you work, the less you sleep, I'll sleep when I'm dead, all these sort of societal things that we tell ourselves around sleep, people bragging about pulling an all-nighter for a test. It's almost like bragging about smoking 3 cigarettes or something like that. And I think that there's going to be, more studies coming out. I wouldn't be surprised if, sleeping basically increases your sleep deprivation rather, increases your hypertension. It increases your risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease. There's very strong causal links. Even like a half-hour sleep deprivation that can happen during this massive global experiment that we do on ourselves twice a year, which is daylight savings time. Basically, when we cut back that hour, there's like a big spike in in heart attacks. It's related to cancer, and those are just like the health things. Personally, I'm most interested in like the cognitive things. So I run a company trying to make sleep more regenerative, and when you sleep deprive yourself, what can happen is you don't really think critically. You're worse at divergent thinking, and and you actually make riskier decisions. There's a lot of research backing that up from like studies about like manipulating like gambling variables and stuff like this. So, I wouldn't be surprised if like almost every violent crime in the United States is committed under some degree of sleep deprivation, or at least a large majority of them, rather. So I see this as a really big problem, and also at the same time, all these wearable devices are finally getting the sensor capacity required to not just accurately measure sleep, and we're doing that in some scientific research that we're about to publish, but actually physically improve sleep quality. And we're trying to do that by manipulating sound, light, and temperature while you're sleeping.
Sound, light, and temperature. And how do you do that?
Yeah, so it's a hard problem. So I have a PhD in cognitive psychology, and I've studied basically like artificial intelligence from a psychology perspective for a long time, basically modeling how people lose attention from being sleep deprived, trying to model that out computationally. And we ended up applying for my company, Sonic Sleep AI, ended up applying for $1 million in grants from the federal government and getting it, where we basically hook people up to electrodes, 16-channel electrodes for a 4-day period. This is a study done with a famous professor, Dr. Raphael Buxton at Penn State. We'll bring them into a lab, hook them up to this, EEG that gives us what I like to call truth on what their sleep is. We'll have someone stay up all night while people are hooked up to the best wearable devices on the market.
Like what?
And so in this study that I'm talking about, we've run a bunch of them, but the one I was referring to is we use Apple Watch, Oura Ring. There's a bunch of Philips devices that have clinical validation for measuring sleep, like ActiWatch, GT3X, like these weird devices that most people aren't aware of. And so we'll use the data from the hardware sensors from these consumer devices are actually pretty darn good. The algorithms for measuring sleep are not so great. They're reasonable at detecting sleep-wake, but for detecting sleep stages, like frankly, when I have clients and I do coaching sessions a couple hours a week, but and they'll say, "Oh, I only got 30 minutes of deep sleep. What's wrong with me?" And there's some relative truth for like what the Fitbit will tell you on things like that, but I wouldn't give it too much credit. That being said, these things are going to get. I wouldn't like put too much stock into that output. We are actually publishing a paper showing that our algorithm is performing better in this study that we ran using an Apple Watch. But basically, we don't just want to measure. We're building a real-time analysis engine for any device that collects sound, motion, and heart rate data, including your phone placed by your bedside. We mask disruptive sounds in your bedroom environment. Like you might be surprised, even like an air conditioning turning on, something as innocuous as this, can result in what's called like a cortical arousal. Basically, your brain, even in healthy people, usually wakes up 10 to 30 times a night. If you have something like sleep apnea, which is linked to like a 5-year decrease in morbidity, basically your lifespan, if it goes untreated. You'll wake up, you'll have like 30 to 100 cortical arousals an hour. So you want to reduce these. And so we'll measure sounds in the room and then adaptively block them out with pink noise. That's in our app that's on the store right now. And then what we're really interested in is this sort of sexy finding in the literature where you could actually play a sound that emulates the frequency of your brain waves when your brain is in deep sleep. And it sort of primes a deep sleep state. And by having a postdoc stay up all night looking at people's brain waves, systematically administering these sounds, we're actually showing that we can increase deep sleep by 3 to 5%. So that might not sound like that much, but it basically, if you can improve your deep sleep just a little bit, it maps onto like a 40% improvement in next day memory performance, human growth hormone increase. It's associated with cleaning out like beta plaque amyloids, which are related to Alzheimer's. Basically, all these good health outcomes. And so that's the research that we're about to publish right now.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And it only, what your app does, it basically plays those sounds, right? Based on the data that people get from their sleep tracking devices.
That's exactly right. So there's a couple things about how sleep works. Basically, throughout the night, it oscillates between light sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, REM. Light sleep, deep sleep, light sleep, REM. And then as the night goes on, you actually get less and less deep sleep. So the night starts out, especially when you're sleep deprived, rich in deep sleep. And that's that sleep that if you wake up from it, you're like really disoriented. Like sometimes when people wake up for like a flight and like they don't know where they are or something like this, you're probably waking up in deep sleep. And when you're in deep sleep, your brain, it's not like a conscious state as much, because your brain is functioning in a way that is not similar to how we function in like waking life or even in our dreams. Like when we're in REM, which is also a regenerative aspect of sleep, and REM and deep sleep actually play off each other too. It's hard to disassociate them a little bit. Your brain is actually functioning very much like waking life when you're in something like a REM state. Mm-hmm. When you're in deep sleep, basically what's happening, what a lot of people think is happening, is you're synaptically downscaling all of the interactions that you made during the day, such that the relevant things to your survival are rising to the top. And this is how we learn and prune out relevant information. And then in REM, you basically replay that relevant information to integrate it.
Mm-hmm. So much science. I don't even know. I feel like I'm not qualified.
Sorry if I'm nerding out.
No, that's a lot of information. It just takes a little bit of time to process this, I guess. And I'm just trying to think how to, what better questions to ask to make it more, I guess, practical for people. Like we talked about deep sleep and how important it is for people to have good quality deep sleep and more of it. And your app can help with that by delivering certain sounds. What about light and temperature you also mentioned? Do you play in your app with your technology with those modalities too? Or is it just sound for now? Is there some research about light and temperature and that their influence on quality of deep sleep?
Yeah, so I mean, when we think about healthy sleep, we think about quiet, dark, and cool environments. That's basically the ideal, what we like to call sleep habitat. We focused first and foremost on sound. That's kind of our specialty.
Mm-hmm.
On the roadmap, we're integrating with the best Internet of Things devices. So if you want to start with light, for example, you've probably heard a lot of the stuff about not getting blue light close to bedtime. There's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of science backing that up. We basically have these photoreceptors in our eyes that respond to sunlight, and this controls the release of melatonin and a huge chemical reaction in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And now we used to only be exposed to light at a certain time in the day. Now we're kind of exposed to it 24/7 thanks to Edison.
Yeah.
What that does is it basically gives our body a false cue for when it should be alert, which can kind of flatten your circadian rhythm. So a healthy sleeper has a strong rhythm. And as we get older, our rhythm usually flattens out. And it's one of the reasons why old people oftentimes sleep less and have a harder time sleeping. So you want a peak alertness, usually around 2 hours after you wake up. And you want to get sunlight exposure in the morning in order to give your body that cue that, okay, now it's time to be alert. These cues, by the way, there's a scientific word for them. They're called Zeitgebers.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's actually a German word. It means timekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest Zeitgebers are basically cues from the environment that can actually impact your genetic expression. And this science is called chronobiology.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. But how do you know? Sorry to interrupt. Do you know how they can influence our genetics?
Yeah, I mean they influence how certain hormones are expressed, which impacts your genetic makeup, basically. And basically every cell in the body, for example, or to some degree, like your organs have like a rhythm. Even like your liver has its own rhythm, like your digestive system has its own rhythm. Those are like subsystems that have their rhythms. And then there's an overall circadian rhythm that kind of, dictates the whole show. You can have, if for example, when you're jet lagged, that's when, you're moving in a time zone, it can shift your rhythm. That's why it's oftentimes difficult to fall asleep. But then there's these cues, the biggest one being sunlight, but it's also timing of meals, timing of energy expenditure, i.e. exercise. Even things like socializing late at night can trigger it out. But really, light, we've evolved, every organism has evolved basically from, every organism has evolved from bacteria in the ocean that could differentiate sunlight from darkness. And that's actually what ended up forming the human eye. And that's why light is such an important aspect of every organism's rhythm.
On the topic of light, do you know if, for example, I on my phone and on my computer, I use this app on my computer, Flux and Twilight on my phone that changes the light according to timing of the day. And do you know, like, if there is still an effect from just looking at my phone or my computer, even if I have those apps, like for quality of my sleep, like?
I mean, I'm a big proponent of Flux, and I'm not sure the other one, but I recommend it to a lot of people. I think there's probably still an effect, a negative effect. If you want to talk about some of the hacks to address this, it's better not to use your phone at night, but I understand if you have to, use Flux. The basic hacks for this stuff are like the true dark glasses that can filter out the sun, what you mentioned with Flux. We're integrating with Philips Hue and this company LIFX, which I think is cool. It's like these bulbs that can systematically manipulate the hue of the lights. And we integrate that in our smart alarm clock functionality as well. So really what you want to be most effective in your life is people talk about not getting the light at night, but a huge part of this is also getting the light in the day, because we're such indoor creatures now. You really should get 30 minutes of sunlight every day before noon. And that kind of sets your rhythm such that your body also gets the cue at night. Okay, I got my sunlight at this time during the day, now I should be tired at this time at night. And when you align your rhythm like that, it's one of the easiest ways to naturally improve your sleep quality.
Nice. I always tell, my clients when I work with them to get outside in the morning and go for a walk or something.
Yeah, it's a really good ritual. I love that. I mean, it also clears your mind. If you live in like Portland, Oregon, and even in New York, I have one. There's these things called like happy lamps. It's literally like seasonal affective disorder lamps, but it emulates the sun. And I'll actually just create a ritual around eating breakfast with this thing on. And that's how I make sure that I always get the sunlight I need every day.
Oh, cool. Cool hack. Yeah, because, sometimes it's not possible really to go for a walk for 30 minutes every morning. I mean, it's ideal, but not always possible.
Exactly.
Okay, so we talked about light. What about, temperature, I guess, but also, I wanted to, talk a little bit about not having enough darkness when you actually sleep, because when I also tell people, it's got to be dark when you sleep, they kind of think that dark, semi-dark is okay, as long as they can comfortably fall asleep, it's fine. And what I believe is we need complete darkness. Like what I like to say is when you look at your hand while, in your bedroom while getting ready for sleep, you shouldn't be able to see it.
I like that. No, I mean, you're 100% right. You should sleep in total. The best way to sleep is in total darkness. That's for sure true. There's a couple interesting things too. First off, the people that, I know a lot of people do this, watch TV have the TV on throughout the night. And I understand that it can be like a comfort, but I really suggest trying to find another way, because it is really harmful to your sleep quality and your health.
Yeah, and I bet, there is something, not just light, but the waves that it produces, like electromagnetic, radiation or whatever it is. Like, for example, even for me, I personally always put my phone, I don't have TV in my room, but I put my phone on in flight mode. And if I don't do that, I actually notice that the quality of my sleep is worse.
Well, I only have opinions on things that have empirical research backing it up. I guess I can kind of see the causal mechanism a little bit. I don't have a strong opinion on the whole electromagnetic frequency stuff. I could go either way on it, frankly. But I mean, I think one thing that I found is I've turned off all the notifications on my phone. I think something that maybe, I'm not sure, but you might be picking up on the fact that when these devices, these distraction devices, basically activate your fight or flight response system at all times. And by the way, if you're stressed, your sleep quality is going to be worse. Not to make you more stressed about having but so I mean, I think part of what you're doing is when you're turning airplane mode on, there's co-variables here. There's other variables here. I think that partly of what you're doing when you're turning airplane mode on is creating that beautiful ritual of, all right, now's my time to regenerate and recuperate, not the world and social media's time to bombard me with information. And so, yeah, I mean, I sleep with my phone on airplane mode too. I think that's great. And, you know, just when you have devices on, they're emitting sound and light, and I think that's probably the driving, disrupting forces. I mean, if you have like serious electromagnetic frequencies, yes, it's harmful. But I think the dosage of a lot of these devices are below the level that it would impact you. Mm-hmm. That's just that's like my general opinion. But I don't really, I could be convinced otherwise. I don't have a very strong opinion on it.
Yeah, I also think, you know, it depends on the person, because I'm just, I know that I am more sensitive to everything, like to any kind of noise, like, and I've been like that since kid. So, like, any noise can distract me, and I'm really like, I need, you know, calm and peaceful environment to do my work. And if there is anything like around me that does any noise or produces, I don't know, anything, then I just can't work. So maybe that's also the thing, that my brain is really more sensitive to that.
And I mean, part of like what biohacking is to me is understanding those individual differences. And when it comes to sleep, like, there's so much truth in that. Like, my sleep pattern could be, my healthy sleep pattern could be very different from your healthy sleep pattern. And that's partly why a lot of the algorithms for these devices aren't so great, is that they're, for the most part, population algorithms. They don't tailorize to the individual's pattern. That's how we figured out some bang for our buck on beating these bigger companies.
Did you make it individual?
Yeah, we have ways to make it individualized.
So let's talk about temperature a little bit. You also mentioned it should be cool. So what's kind of like maybe a little bit of research picking it up, and what's the ideal temperature for good quality sleep?
Yes, so temperature, you know, sound and light have been like really well-trodden territory in both the science and in the commercial market. Like, there's a lot of sound and light devices. Temperature is one of those things that I think we're going to start hearing more about in terms of improving your life and your health. There's a lot of cool tech that's out there, and more coming out that's more practical. Excuse me. But basically, there's like an FDA, for example, if you cool yourself before going to bed, it actually provides one of these cues for your body to fall asleep. And there's an FDA-approved device, actually, where it's basically a head mask that cools your head and helps you fall asleep. And one of those things that can also do that is even like taking a bath, maybe like a half hour or so before you fall asleep. What it does is it raises your body temperature, and then when you get out, or a hot shower, there's a counteracting cooling time, and that actually provides a cue to help you fall asleep. So there's lots of reasons why people have problems falling asleep, but this is maybe one way to mitigate, to address some of those issues. So the main thing with temperature is falling asleep. But also, one of the most interesting things from the science is that when we're in REM sleep, we actually lose thermoregulation. Meaning, if it's hot in your environment, your body temperature gets hot. If it's cold in your environment, your body temperature gets cold. We basically become reptiles when we're in REM sleep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, it's kind of crazy. Honestly, like, looking at someone's brainwaves shift between the stages when they're asleep, it's like almost a magical thing. And REM is really distinct because you see the eyes darting across on the EEG. But we lose thermoregulation, and that's why sometimes since you get more REM later in the night, a lot of times when I have clients, sometimes they'll wake up maybe around like 2-ish in like a sweat. That's probably because you had a non-ideal temperature environment and you hit REM. It was too hot, and that pushed you into an awakening. So there's really also, similar to how there's an ideal sound environment to prime deeper sleep, there's probably also an ideal temperature environment to make your sleep more regenerative. And that's something that no one's fully investigated yet.
Yeah, I heard something about 65 or 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I mean, usually like 68 is what, like, again, this is like very general feedback. Like everyone's a little bit different. Like, for example, like with the sleep need, it's a big range, it's 7 to 9 hours. It's a pretty big range. People are different. So you want it cool, like 68, but, my parents sleep with it in 76, and I don't think it's necessarily an issue for them. So my point is everyone's a little bit different, but you do want it cool. And the other thing is, I have like a blog post I wrote called Split Blankets, Not Beds, all about how the sleep partner can disrupt your sleep quality. And for example, people run at different internal body temperatures, but specifically men and women, men usually run hotter than women generally. So it's better, and in other European countries like Netherlands, it's more common to have like multiple blankets, multiple layers, such that, one person isn't too hot and the other person is too cold. It's better, in my opinion, to keep it cold and stack up on the blankets, because it's easier to get, to be warm and to get cold, to be cold and to get warm than the opposite.
Yeah, I agree. I always try to keep my room a little bit cooler than I'm comfortable with if I'm, not sleeping under the blanket, but it works for night.
Exactly. And then there's other things like simple solutions like wool insulates better than other fabrics. There's products that I've played with a little bit called like Chili Pad and Bed Jet. You put it under your bed and it can change the temperature on the left versus the right side. There's this product Ember, EMBR, that we might integrate with. It's actually a wristwatch that can control your internal body temperature.
Really?
It's pretty crazy technology. It's used for hot flashes. Is the main use case. And that can also be a major issue during sleep.
Yeah. So we talked about sound, light, temperature. This is Food School podcast, so we talk a lot about food, nutrition on this podcast. And do you have any advice about food and drinks either before sleep or during the day to either drink and eat or avoid to improve the quality of sleep?
Yeah. So I mean, I know less about like the biochemistry stuff than some other people. I come from like a behavioral cognitive science perspective. But there's a couple like key things that are generally accepted as the right thing to do in the scientific community. Basically, you want to go to bed full but not too full. So when you go to bed hungry, a lot of times it can be hard to fall asleep, and you don't want to do like the night eating thing. That's giving your body that wrong cue for when it should be expending energy. And it's a problem for a lot of people. I used to do it a little bit too, actually, so I can relate to it.
Probably all of us.
Yeah. So a lot of times, sometimes people do it on a regular basis. So you want to try to reduce that. So you want to usually, but also if you're too full, that can, create some issues too with like your digestion while you're sleeping, and negatively impact your sleep quality. So you want something like sort of in the middle, and you want to usually eat like 2 hours before bedtime. at least. I mean, a lot of things, like, for example, the circadian rhythm dictates the best time of the day to eat and get energy. So usually, like, the rhythm peaks, your energy level, one of the peaks is right before dinner. Is usually one of the best times to, say, work out. So a lot of times when we're talking about food and exercise, we're thinking about how to align the timing of those things with your naturally occurring rhythm in order to make them the most effective. You know, I've done a lot of, like, I'm trying to lose 10 pounds right now, actually.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going. I joined a gym, and I've been doing, I think we talked about this before, but like the sort of like the periodic fasting thing.
Yeah, intermittent fasting. Huge fan.
Intermittent fasting. Where you know, I'm not like very strict about it, but I'll try to not eat until, like, I'm a night person, as I mentioned to you earlier, but so I'll try not to eat till like 2 or 3, and then go from there. I'm kind of restricting it to like a 6-hour period of eat time. And honestly, it's hard for me to give like generic advice on stuff like this. I mean, this is something that I'm doing right now. I played with like slow carb diet, Tim Ferriss's thing, the bulletproof diet, and the coffee. A lot of those things in the past, when I was running my company, I kind of just did, we finally had a couple big wins, so I'm trying to focus on my, I was just focusing on the company for like 3 years and not my health, so I'm trying to switch back. Anyway, other things with food, there's some evidence that like magnesium helps in terms of food, and maybe less carbs, but I haven't seen like the strong science on that stuff yet.
Yeah, some people fall asleep, you know, with more carbs. Like,
I think there's a lot of individual differences. That's why I'm kind of reluctant on giving like generic feedback.
And I guess, you know, there is like also what do they call it in science, U curve. When you do it, you know, to a point, it works for a better outcome, and when you do too much, it does the opposite. So sometimes, you know, it's all about
balance.
Yeah.
It's all about moderation.
What about your take? You know, you said you drink coffee, so you're obviously a coffee drinker. What about coffee? Like, do you have any data and personal opinion about the timing of coffee to not interrupt with sleep?
Yeah, actually, there is a lot of research on the science of coffee. I mean, one thing we're trying to do is prevent something called sleep inertia in the morning, which is basically morning brain fog. And one of the strongest ways to do that, frankly, is to drink coffee in the morning.
That's why people do it.
I mean, that's why. I mean, it's not like a rocket science thing to say. That's why everyone does it. There's other weird things, by the way, like splashing cold water on your face wakes you up. We actually wake people up very slowly in the morning with sounds, which is frankly the right way to wake up. You want to it helps you get a little more sleep when you need it. But the other interesting thing about coffee is, on average, it has like a 4-hour half-life. So, like, half of it is still in your system 4 hours later. But here's the thing, and it's approximately 5 to 6 hours. I knew it was pretty long. So that's like a pretty long half-life, and so that's why they say to kind of cut it out between 2 and 3, to stop with the coffee. But here's the interesting thing from the science, is that there's a lot of individual differences. And actually, if you have a really fast metabolism, people with faster metabolisms, the half-life can be as short as like 2 hours. So that's why, again, it's a little bit hard to give generic feedback, but in general, you should probably stop drinking coffee at around 2 to 3, because even if you're not perceiving that the coffee is resulting in troubles falling asleep, there's evidence that it negatively impacts your sleep quality, which is something you wouldn't necessarily be perceptive of.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. If I drink coffee after 2 p.m., what changes is when I wake up, sleeping the same amount of hours, I just never feel rested.
Yeah, I mean, there's evidence that that's exactly what it would do.
Yeah, so I love my coffee, but for me it's like before 2 p.m., that's it.
And one hack that I found for myself is I'll do the coffee and then maybe switch to like a 5-hour energy or some other thing that doesn't have caffeine in it.
Yeah, I mean, I drink my teas and stuff. Speaking about hacks...
Yeah, like decaf tea.
Speaking about hacks, what are your top, I don't know, whatever number is, sleep hacks that you personally use to improve the quality of your sleep? It can be anything, light, temperature, food. So
for myself, so this feedback is very different for someone that, say, has insomnia versus someone that's just trying to optimize. So if I'm stressed or something, it's not that abnormal for me to have some issue falling asleep, for example. But for the most part, and that's rare, for me, recently, one of the biggest things that I've found is, frankly, just turning off all notifications on my phone. It's just allowed me to sort of put my technology in its place where I go to the technology when I want to. It's a tool that I use. It's not something that bombards me all the time. And it's actually really helped me sort of deactivate my fight or flight response system. And I think putting technology in its place is one of the big sort of cultural movements that we're trying to promote. So that's one sort of set of things. The light is something that I've played with a lot, and I sort of have, in my sleep environment, I have it all connected to like Google Home. So I have different light regimens using this bulb LIFX, LIFX, and I'll literally say to Google Home, for example, like I'm awake or I'm home, and these different sort of light environments will come on, and I do it based on the time of day.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like a weird thing that if you want to really get into this stuff. So I'll like have different verbal calls that I'll give to Google based on the light that I should be getting based on the time of day, basically. And then, I mean, I always use my app, obviously, like blocking out noise pollution is one of the simplest hacks to improve your sleep. And then I sleep with the Apple Watch, because we have this beta app that integrates with the Apple Watch that we're about to release. It's an update to our software that delivers the deep sleep stimulation to me. I sort of set up my home, my bedroom environment, to have like surround sound speakers, and we're imagining like that the bedrooms of the future will have more sort of audio in the environment, and I've sort of created these sound environments for myself while I sleep that are relaxing if I'm having issues falling asleep. Like there's different relaxation sounds and meditations that we have, and then it blocks out the noise pollution. And then it does the deep sleep stimulation. And part of what this is I really think there's something into like almost forming a Pavlovian response between these cues and you sleeping. kind of big picture, that's something we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it surely you surely sound like a sleep scientist when you describe your room and your whole sleep routine.
It's pretty weird.
That's not weird, it's normal when you're passionate about something, that's what you do. It's like, if you ask me about any food that is like in your sight, I would probably tell you how many calories it has, what nutrition it has, and what it can do for you.
Yeah. So we're just crazy, passionate scientists, I guess.
Yeah, and thanks again, Dan, for your time and all these interesting facts and stories and science about sleep and hacks. Tell our listeners where they can learn more about your work, about the company, this Sonic Sleep, and your apps and everything that you are up to.
Yeah, so if you just Google Sonic Sleep, all this stuff will pop up. I gave a TED Talk on the deep sleep stimulation.
Yeah, I'm going to link that in the show notes.
Cool. Yeah, so I go over a lot of the science in that TED Talk in a succinct way. But I'm very Googleable, so Daniel Gartenberg, and a lot of stuff pop up.
Where are you the most active when it comes to social media? Are you active on any particular...
I'm usually a Twitter person.
Okay, cool. That's where people should go to tune in to more of sleep science from you. So thanks again for your time and everything, that all the information and useful advice that you gave to our listeners, that I'm sure they will use and will improve their sleep, and most importantly their mental and physical performance and how they show up during the day for life.
My pleasure, Angela. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dan. And